Welcome everyone to another episode of the Khalis Podcast, a platform to share the thoughts and work of both aspiring and established writers, authors, poets, artists, and activists who are passionate about preserving and furthering Sikh and Punjabi heritage and identity. Today, I'm joined by Baljit Ghuman for a very overdue podcast episode to speak about their book, which was published with Khalis House on the 1st of April 2025. They're a writer and a author based in Toronto, and the novel that we're going to be speaking about is titled Grandfather's Mulberry Tree. It's a short novel, and it's a captivating and cathartic story that follows an adolescent Sikh boy's journey through turbulent Punjab in the 1980s, and also the boy's unconscious attempt to heal from personal trauma. So we're talking about creative writing, fictional writing within Sikh literature. But before I go any further, Baljit Ghuman, welcome to the Khalis Podcast. Thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
So what I will do, like I do with most of the authors and guests that join me on the podcast, is just start with asking you a little bit about your background, how you became an author, how did all that journey come together?
At present, I'm living in Toronto, as you mentioned earlier. I was born in Punjab, so I have spent my first 15 to 16 years of life in Punjab. And then I came to, and after that, I migrated to here in Toronto, in Canada, in late 80s. And I did my schooling here, and I work here since then. And writing was always there with me. Always, it's a form of expression for me. And there are different stories that I felt a need to be told. And over the years, I have written some poetry. I have done some work for newspapers. I have done some work for media. And then at one point, I decided I should attempt a short novel, and this is the first one.
Amazing, amazing. And so in terms of this, let's go into the novel then. So I want to ask you firstly how difficult it was to express the story in the way that you've done, given the subject matter of, this particular book, and how you did that and made it accessible to the reader.
Yeah, it was not easy for me, as to say, and I can get into that why. But I write short stuff. So I started with the poetry, and my poetry is more like freestyle quotes, very short poems. They're to the point, and that's why the novel is short, because I like to get the idea out there and the story behind it. So it was actually quite hard for me to get this book completed. It almost took me, I think, about 10 years.
Wow.
And the reason for that is the story kept changing. I wasn't satisfied and happy with what's on the paper. And eventually there are two stories which are merged into this, and this book got created. And that's why it took it long time for me to do it. I've written it few times, restarted from scratch again.
Yeah.
And I went through that process of writing and self-satisfaction, that okay, I felt at a point that this is what I want to present to the readers. This is what uh, is settling with me. I'm able to resonate with what I have written. And then of course, then it was, how do I get it to the readers? Right.
Right.
I started looking at various outlets. How can I get the book published? There was a self-publish option, and then there was publishing option. There was electronic format. Nowadays there are so many outlets,
Sure.
social media, PDFs, and I was trying to figure out what would be the right thing for me to do. For me, it was not just about selling books. This book is very important to me. I wanted to make sure the story and the feelings behind it and the concept of what I'm trying to put forward, the message goes out somehow to the right people who need to read it.
Mhm.
And obviously, the youth and the young Sikh people, that's where I wanted this message to go for those people who may have never visited Punjab, or who are born outside of Punjab, and who were not there in 1980s to see what was happening. I wanted that audience to read that. So, I tried various channels, self-publishing, and of course, going through your publishing house here.
Sure, yeah. Great. But to go back a minute there, you mentioned how the story was written and then rewritten multiple times until you felt happy and until it resonated with you. So how did you measure that? Was that based on facts that you had read? Was it based off like what you'd seen, what you'd heard? How did you come to that decision when you did to say, right, this is now maybe a true reflection, although it's a fiction work, it's obviously based and inspired by true events, based on what was happening in Punjab. How did all of that come about?
So when I first started, I this is long time ago. I think in mid 2000s, I was sitting with someone who was telling me their story, and their family's story of escape from New Delhi from 1984,
Right,
all the anti-Sikh violence, and that's where it originated originally,
right,
to have that story told of escape. And then, I was having hard time with it because I did not witness that firsthand what happened in Delhi
mm,
or other cities of India, because I was in Punjab and Jalandhar that time. And I have only heard it through the newspapers, people telling us their stories. Um, and I was trying to see how I can connect 1984 June and November and my personal experiences, what I have
right,
seen firsthand. So when I started to write the story, it was all secondhand stories, and I was
right,
I was trying to figure out where do I fit as an individual in this story, and as an author and as a narrator, where do I
right,
fit this? And I wasn't feeling the direct connection to it. I needed
right,
something there which I have seen it, I have felt it, I have witnessed it. So I took those two stories, what people told me, and I took my experiences that I've seen it in Punjab and other states. And as I said, I stayed my first 15, 16 years there. So I took those two different experiences, other people's and my own, and merged them together into this story. And story evolved because original story was all based on what people were telling me
right,
and what I was asking people. And then this story kind of brings in what I have heard, and I was able to put my own experiences into the story, and I was more connected to it. I could I could see myself in there, that okay, this is this story belongs to me, this story belongs
mhm,
to the Sikh people, because it covers, not only covers my experience, but it covers vast experience of so many different Sikhs that I am able to compile into this short novel. So it took me a while to articulate it,
right,
to put it in the right format, to put the right chapters in the place, what
yeah,
needs to go first, what needs to go later. So,
mm,
I was talking about 1984 June, then I talk about 1984 November. So, I was starting off with that, and then I said, no, there need to be some kind of a pre-introduction, for I was keeping in mind that people who are non-Sikh and
right,
people who are not familiar with what happened in Punjab in 1980s, and even the Sikhs who may not be familiar
yeah,
100% what happened, I kept that in mind, and then told the story that even the person who's not fully aware of what happened in the history are able to read it and figure out what's going on.
right, yeah. There's a lot to think about in the
Yeah,
whole process, right? Because, like you said, there are things that you've heard from others, and then there are things that you know from your own experience, and then you're
yeah.
also mindful of, who the reader will be. So was that a conscious decision? Did you, who in your mind, did the target reader change as you kind of wrote the
Uh,
book?
Yeah, I think I always, since whenever I have written for newspaper articles, and I have written short stories in Punjabi, I have written poetry. I think it's just my nature to keep those things in mind,
Yeah,
that if I am putting something out there, um, anybody should be able to pick it up, read it, and majority of their questions should be answered.
Right.
So, so that's just, I think, in my nature to go about doing things. So audience never really changed, but I wanted to make sure that all the audience is addressed.
Right.
So sometimes what happens is we focus on Sikh audience, and then you end up finding out that majority of them already aware of it. They know
Mhm.
about it. As I said, it's not about just writing a book. It is about that message getting out to the world,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
outside of the Sikh community as well. And sometimes it is more important to tell the other communities what happened with us
Right.
than just reiterating to yourself for the few 5 or 10 or 100 people.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
kept that in mind that this needs to go out to a bigger audience. But for sure, the young Sikh people are the main people who I really want this book to be reading this.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Also, earlier you mentioned how you had a conversation with somebody, maybe it was a young person in the early
Yeah.
2000s. So in terms of like the main kind of catalyst for writing the story, what was like, why did you decide on this particular topic? Why, June and November 84? Was it to spread awareness about what took place in perhaps a different medium? Because often we'll hear about the facts, we'll read the reports or the news articles and books that have been written. But I think creative writing has its own place as well, and you're able to articulate and tell what took place through a different medium. So, but why did you choose the topic of 84?
Yeah, there are a few things, I guess. First, it's being a Sikh, coming from Sikh family, being in Punjab at that time in '84, being a child there. I think it impacted me. And the book is written from a 12-year, 13-year-old individual who's
Yeah.
looking at these events happening around them, and they're trying to assess it at their age. So the
Right.
whole book is narrated from a young child's perspective, how they assess the events happening around, which are violent in
Mm.
nature, and what they make out of it, and how that has impacted. And I think there was a need for me to express that. There was
Mhm.
a need for me to tell my story in a way.
Right.
I felt a need that I need to be voice for many of those children who were of my age in
Right.
1980s living in Punjab. I
Uh-huh.
wanted to be their voice because I don't
Right.
see those books out there. Only recently things have changed, and even majority of those books are being written by Sikhs born outside
Mhm.
of and I wanted to bring that out. I wanted to be the voice of those individuals. This book is ode to the whole generation of 80s, 70s, and 80s. This is a tribute to them,
Yeah.
to bring forward to the world what they felt at that time.
Right.
How what they went through. Wanted to bring out the psychological part of what happened. So, and that is not spoken in our communities. The mental health is not
Mhm.
spoken very openly in our
Mhm.
communities. There is a taboo, there is a stigma around it. And I want this book kind of puts a light on the mental health and the psychological aspect, and how, very specifically, when we talk about the Shaheed families, how were they affected and what happened with them and their lives aftermath.
Sure.
Because we talk about 84, we talk about November 1984, June 84, and a little bit after, and we talk about violence, and then the conversation ends. But for those families, the conversation has not ended. It has turned into a generational trauma.
Sure.
And I wanted to put light out there and put it out right out there in front of the Sikhs and the world that, you know what, the conversation is not complete yet. We haven't addressed the generational trauma. We haven't gone back and did a post-mortem on it, what happened, and did we as a community failed anywhere, or are there any achievements? have we done a postmortem of that and come? So that was one aspect of this I wanted to bring. The second part is that I like history. I like talk about history. My education is not in history, but I'm very interested in it. And I thought that whereas my story, people's story, but that is the history of Sikh people, what I'm writing. And I was very careful that I'm not making up stuff just to make up stuff. The book
Hmm.
is based on true events. People have
Sure.
gone through this, what's in the book. And I wanted to capture the history. I wanted to put forward something that 50 years from now or 20 years from now or 10 years, 5 years from now, some young, a very young student, university students or academics or anybody want to see what happened in Punjab. We have history books, but we don't have much of books which talk about the psychological effect of Shaheed families and how it has continued. So I wanted to capture that in history for future references.
Hmm.
And those are the two main things that I wanted to get this out. But I think mainly it was the need to express. So I write
Right.
poetry, I write short stories or this short novel from the need of expressing and telling the stories. And sometimes I guess Sikh people have historically been, we always say that Sikh people they create history, but they don't document it. They don't write it down, and
Hmm.
then somebody else comes
Yeah.
and they write our history, and then we have to reference our history who is written by somebody else,
Sure.
and there is no way to authenticate that. How did the Sikh felt? It is again
Mhm.
second-hand history. So I wanted to make sure that at least whatever I can do in my capacity to capture my opinions, my feelings, my history firsthand, put it in a book format for others to read and use as they need to in future.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I think there's a few things that come out of what you just explained there. And I think the biggest thing for me, what really drew me to this book and this story was that human aspect. And you spoke about like the psychological effect of witnessing and experiencing and living through such a traumatic time period, right? Seeing that violence and that fear, specifically making reference to the Shaheed Parivars and the impact on them. Um, you know, just one thing Khalra's work had highlighted. He
Yeah,
spoke about that. He spoke to uplift them, and he would often say things like, we don't even know the numbers, we don't even know who's Chacha, who's Daya, that for me, like looking back now, what he was trying to do there was to humanize
yeah,
an entire peoples that had been dehumanized by the state, right? And I think this is part of like what you said there, like we don't talk about it. Is because we're still unpacking because trauma is often layered, right? Like I've been doing like Sikhi related work for over a decade now, and very early on we did work on 84. We were looking at the November genocide specifically, and we did an
yeah,
exhibition here in the UK. And one of the things that we're looking back now, what we did was, we would like showcase, the Jeevanese, for example, of those who fought, but also those who underwent horrific torture and abuse. And Sangat members would come, whether it was a Gurdwara, wherever it was, and whenever it came to, looking at even an image of somebody who had been tortured or made shaheed, they would, step away. And that for me now, looking back now, is also a form of unprocessed trauma. But it's
yeah,
such a difficult thing to even address and talk about. So I think this is where like, your work has to be commended because, like I said, there are different mediums to put information out there, events that took place. You can go down the route of a history book, but a novel gives you the author want to express your own thoughts and experiences, but also that artistic license to really weave and delve into a character and bring out that emotional, that human aspect that is often overlooked. It's not there in
yeah,
statistics.
yeah.
They just become data points.
Data points. And I want to bring up actually one more point. There is a chapter in the book called Battle of Thoughts.
Mm.
And it that whole chapter, what's in there is it's to some level had also been a challenge for me and my family. My father is one of the shaheeds, and there is always these conversation over decades,
Mm,
families and people we meet. Why did he do what he did?
mm,
He was a human rights activist. He was a Sikh activist. He was connected with Damdami Taksal, and he was political activist with the main political party that time there. And he's credited for saving more than 256 youth out of jails and being assassinated or killed through the fake police encounters.
mhm,
So he was doing this work, and he was assassinated. And there was always this question, oh, why did he do that? Why did he have to do that? And the family
mm,
had to suffer. So we as a family been strong, and we supported all that. My mom supported his human rights work, and
mm,
he was a strategist, and she supported all his work. And I was young, and I have seen a lot of things, people coming to our house, having meetings and all that. And
mm,
that question sometimes would come, if he wouldn't have done that, he wouldn't have died a violent death at a very young age.
mm,
Family wouldn't have suffered or gone through all these traumatic events over the years. We
mhm,
had to leave our house in 87. We never went back. The house is gone. We lost everything. We didn't had anything. We were basically on the road from one rented place to the another. And that chapter deals with it. That
right.
is the chapter where the young son um, wants to know from the father what are the reasons and how this should be taken. And
Mhm,
I think that chapter is very important for young Sikhs to read, and for those who have any doubts
mhm,
that why should we be activists?
mhm, mhm,
And why should we do activism?
mhm,
Why is our voice important? Why we need to make individual choices, but while keeping the community at large in view? And
mhm,
that chapter talks about the bond and the relationship between son and a father. And I personally feel that that chapter, I tried to have that conversation
mhm,
between two individuals and answer some of the questions, not everything, but some of the
mhm,
questions. And that chapter has come out again, based on some true events, come out of my own family's personal discussions and
mhm.
relatives discussions. So what you see in the book is real. This
Yeah,
is happening outside, within closed doors. Families are discussing that, but
sure.
they don't come out and speak openly. And
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I do, and I make a point of it, that this is part of a Shaheed family's conversations.
Mhm,
Uh, Sometimes people may be portraying themselves strong and confident outside, but what's happening inside of
mhm,
them
mhm,
is different. Have we as a community made a conscious decision to approach these families, have discussions with them, how much support that we have offered? And this book very silently, and I think almost always people who have read it missed it, because it is a very silent theme in there. In the end, what's happening, and once you read the story, what's going on, as I talk about psychological aspect of Shaheed families, it kind of talks about that people have been lonely over the
mhm,
decades.
mhm,
And have we missed something?
mhm,
Was there anything we could have done better? Is there
mhm,
anything right now can we do better for these families? And I
mhm,
think that kind of is a subtle message in there.
mhm.
uh, and people reading carefully see it, and they're able to catch it.
Yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. And it reminds me of something that I heard very recently. So you may have read a book that came out a little while ago by Malkit Singh Bhavanigar, and it was called Vak Vak Guru Karate Hoy Hamle. Like it's a an overview of all the Guru Kars that were also simultaneously attacked in June specifically.
Yeah.
And I think it's in the forward to that, or at some point, maybe it's in an interview afterwards, he speaks about it. He says, "ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਣ ਗਏ ਸੀ, when we went to actually interview families and locals, those who had survived, to get down information about, who came, what happened at this Gurukar, who was involved. He said that, that one Matawa pulled him to one side and said that it's been a very long time. Obviously, his research is more recent. It's been probably 35, 40 years. But I think that kind of echoes what you're saying there. Like sometimes in the past, I think organizations have definitely helped by way of Maya sending money and doing what they can, right? Different organizations have done that. But actually sometimes the real work happens when you just sit down with somebody and let them bring it out, right?
Yeah, I
And
can tell you firsthand, a lot of our people who have been victims of this genocide, not necessarily always needed money. What they needed was somebody there uh, who they can you can find a shoulder to cry,
sure.
somebody to depend on, somebody they could trust. The biggest issue during 80 was the trust. You couldn't
Right.
trust anyone. You didn't know who you can trust.
Yeah.
Things were so bad, and those were the moments when they felt lonely. They didn't know where to go. And it's not in this book, but I'm working on my own autobiography for later. But I can tell you a little bit that there been huge organizations and individuals who refused assistance, who would not step up. But yet, there are individuals and organizations which you would not even think about that they will help you, came forward saying, "We are here at your disposal. What would you want from us?"
Right.
And this is very sad. And more sad is that it still continues. And I'm talking about 86, 87, and we are in 2025. Nothing much has changed, and that is the unfortunate part. People are more aware, people are
Right.
trying to do things, but it seems we have not reached that point where we should be. And I'm not sure what exactly the faults are. Needs to be a bigger discussion.
Yeah. Well, that actually maybe leads me on nicely to my next question, which was about, what were your aspirations or what were your hopes in writing the book?
Yeah, as I said, I just want this story to go out to young Sikh people and the people outside. I know that people who were there in 80s, who are my age, and they were there when they read their book. Basically, they thought it is their story, that I'm telling their story to them, and that was unique, and I got that because, as I said, it is. I was trying to be the voice of all those individuals who a full generation of that time is passing through and eventually will be gone without their trauma being addressed. So they have lived with all that stories that they are not able to or not ready to tell and share. So I wanted to at least put one story out. This is just a one story. There are
Sure.
hundreds and thousands of
Yeah.
stories. I wanted to put that out. And my hope is that people who were not there to read them, for young Sikhs to see. The book is not. I was very careful in the descriptions, and the scenes that I create are not violent, are but still talking about violence in peaceful words. So a lot of parents call me and they say, "Baljit, we are gonna get your book, but can my child read it? Is it for the children?" I said, "Yeah, I think they should be. If they are 15, 16 years old, they are teenagers, young adults, that's where it should actually go." And that's why I wrote it in such a way that the violence is expressed in a very subtle format. And book, while talking about violence and what happened to the Sikhs, it talks about the relationships, and it talks about peace. It still talks about love. It talks about relationship, a child's relationship with his and her environment, with their mother, their father, and the relationship with the grandfather. And the human relationship with the nature. And
Mhm.
that's where the mulberry tree comes in. So
Sure.
it talks about all these relationships while it's talking about what's happening to that one community, how they're being targeted. But it's, as I said, it is narrated from a child's perspective.
Mhm.
So I always tell them definitely it is for them. Read it yourself first. And if
Right.
you feel that, yeah, your child can read this, give it to them. Because that's what I want. I want the young people to understand what happened. And this is coming the first-hand experience. And that's why, as I said earlier, I merged the second-hand experience and first-hand experience together. So it's best
Mhm.
of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even till now, books on 84 are few and far between in terms of novels, right? I can only think of like a handful in English. I mean, the Punjabi,
Yeah,
there might be
yeah,
maybe
they're
more.
more. Yeah.
But like I think what sets this one apart from the ones that I've stumbled across is you're centering that the human experience, like I said earlier. So there's all of this stuff happening, which is important to address and document. But what was the individual child in this instance? What were they enduring?
Yeah.
Psychologically, what were they going through? And then also how that can have then repercussions for future generations. So that's something that this does uniquely, I think.
And I also try to cover both genders.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
there are two children in the book.
Yeah,
One is
yeah,
male, one is female. And
yeah.
I'm trying to show the reader how these two different genders experiences
Mm,
and and the violence against women
right.
and violence against men.
Mhm,
How did that play out? And
mhm,
and
mhm,
uh, and and there are, again, as I said, the violence is expressed there, but in such a subtle format. And that was the first comment I got. I
yeah,
gave this book to somebody to read who was female, and they read the book to review it before I got it published, to give me some feedback. And they said, "Wow, Baljit, like you're talking about violence in the whole book, but you don't mention any specific, like very targeted, narrow down, violent description as you would usually read in books."
mhm,
And
mhm.
that was consciously done.
Right, right. Yeah. And was that decision taken because you didn't want to um, re-traumatize, or were you specifically aimed at just focusing more on like kind of the emotional, the psychological,
Yeah,
thoughts of the individual?
I think if I'm answering your question very honestly, I think it would traumatize me to
Mm,
go through those details.
mm, mm,
And it would be triggering for me, but it will be triggering for the reader. There are times when you want to do that,
right,
to explain that and get into that, but that would be more of a different kind of a book.
right.
And this was more that the psychological aspect takes the higher aspect,
Mhm,
because I think I'm assuming this, and I think we as a community know the violent part.
mhm,
We know, people were killed and, burnt alive, and women were raped. And we know that. We have read it again and again and again.
mhm.
But as I said, that's where it stops. And
Yeah.
then people don't understand, but what happened to those women who were raped? What were their lives after that? What
Mhm,
happened to
mhm,
those families? People who lost their sons, fathers, daughters and were killed. How did the parents live? What
yeah.
happened to that family? The aftermath. We sometimes talk about people who fell victim and they are no longer alive now. They
Mm,
were killed or gone. But we sometimes fail to talk about what happened to the people who survived, who actually witnessed that. You know,
mhm,
my mother was standing right there with my father when he was assassinated. She saw the bullets coming. She saw getting him hit, and all that process. And that has traumatized her all her life. So
mhm,
when people talk about my father, they just talk about my father.
mhm,
And I said,
mhm.
but how come they're not talking about my mother,
Yeah.
my father? 4 bullets came to hit him. He died. But my mother had to live with that for, next 30 years and go through that every day and every night. And so much have happened after that to protect her children. We don't talk about it.
No.
We have forgotten those women who of Sikh genocide. And wherever I go, I talk about women of Sikh genocide, that majority men died, and these women who are wives or mothers or sisters were left behind, and we don't talk about it.
No, we
And that
don't.
is such a important aspect, and they are living, and
Yeah.
they need us as a community.
Hmm.
Can't just talk about shaheeds themselves, but we
Hmm.
need to talk about their families. And I feel, and I could be wrong, and many of your listeners may not like it, but maybe somewhere inside us as a community, we know we didn't do enough, and
Hmm.
we are not ready to face it.
Yeah.
And this novel kind of puts a mirror in front of you saying,
Hmm.
what did you do?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not to point fingers or make somebody feel bad. It is to make them think, what can I do now?
Yeah.
Can I write my story? I want
Mhm.
this book to be an inspiration for others who are not ready to tell their stories, to tell their
Mhm.
stories.
Yeah.
Storytelling is very important.
Yeah.
Narratives are important. And as I said before, we don't create these documents. We don't tell
Mhm.
our stories. And then somebody else tells our stories as they wish. And
Yeah.
and while I'm talking about these stories, there is a chapter in the book, another one, the yellow mustard flower fields, the yellow mustard flower fields. I wrote that. I forgot about it. I reviewed my book. I reviewed that chapter, and suddenly I clicked. It talks about mustard flowers,
Mhm.
and it talks about how the fields, mustard flower fields of Punjab, which were yellow in color, became red with the blood of young Sikhs and the fake police encounters.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that chapter later on inspired the mustard flower campaign.
Wow.
And the mustard flower ended up bringing forward as a campaign to be used as a symbol of Sikh genocide.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's where the whole concept is, to tell our stories ourselves,
Mhm.
and as the victims, as the survivors, and as the fighters. uh,
Yeah.
you know and we will tell our story, and that's the truth. We don't want somebody else to tell our story.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And this is this is why, like, this is the reason why Khalis House exists as well, to
Yeah,
give a voice to our own writers, right? Because one thing that I've seen myself firsthand over the past 5 years is we have a wealth of talented writers, artists, poets. And often, I mean, maybe it's a bit different now because of the growth of social media. People are perhaps able to express those skill sets and those creative um, powers better. But I think, like in the past, certainly we haven't been able to do that. And you mentioned about narrating and the importance of storytelling, even storytelling as a medium of perhaps healing and no, maybe not so much closure, but certainly on route to that.
yeah.
And we live in a world of like animation and CGI and AI. So for you as a writer, how important is the art of storytelling via the written word? How important is that in today's day and age?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Like in last 2 decades or so, I have done a lot of radio shows on different issues, mental health and autism. I work on disability rights as well. I do run a non-profit called Six for Autism. So we do a lot of work in the community with school boards and universities. And I get invited to these universities or non-profit organization to do presentations and talks. And I talk about healing.
Mhm.
And I talk about self-healing and self-motivation.
Mhm.
Sometimes you don't have the environment where the healing is available, or a mechanism to go through the healing process. When we talk about the Western world, They have very structured approaches to everything. There is a process you follow, you go there, you do this, and this is the process. In our communities, we don't have that process. Maybe I think at one point we did, way back when the villages were the main places, the gurdwaras was the main places to go, and there was small communities very closely knit. And my problem is the whole village's problem now, and we have lost that. We have that disconnection between our communities, which are divided into individuals now, and we find those mechanisms to go to. We never created those structured mechanisms while the community was disconnecting. We disconnected, and now we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So this was, writing this book was a healing process for me. This was the process. I was going back with my own emotions and articulating them on paper. And as they say, when you write things out, you feel better. That, okay, I have taken it out of my system. And
Yes.
sometimes you have to do that when there is no mechanism to go through a process. You create your own. And I always do that. And even when I'm speaking about autism and mental health, and I talk about the caregivers and self-care for the caregivers, that is the very recent focus for this year for me. And so this book, I believe, and at least I think one reader have mentioned to me or messaged me saying this book was healing for them to read, right? And even when you read it in the back page of the book, it talks about how this young child is on the route of self-healing and wants to address those issues. And I guess this is where it silently points in the story that why does this young Sikh man boy has to do this? Where was there no mechanism or the community available that he could have gone to? Those are the questions pending, and those
Yeah.
are the questions reader has to answer themselves. And answer could be different for each reader, right? And this is it becomes a bigger discussion for community.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
this book, I needed it to be a platform or a starting of a bigger
Yeah.
discussion in the Sikh community. I don't have all the answers. I
Sure.
can only share what I know, but I
Yeah.
think the bigger discussion needs to take place and answer these questions. But I think to answer your question, that this book was very healing for me, and
Right.
this was my process, right? While being an author, while being writing, I needed to
Sure.
do that. But with AI and all that, that is not possible.
Right.
So it is, they are great tools that you can use, but you need to know when and where and how to use a tool. So if you have a screwdriver, which is a star screwdriver, and you're trying to screw something which does not have the same fit, the tool's not going to work. So tools are there for us to use appropriately, and we need to know when to use that. So to write this book, I didn't use any AI, nothing. I wrote it myself, sat down, rewrote it, rewrote
Yeah.
it, and I had three people who edited it. And
Right.
again and again and again, going over it over again. And that process brought out discussion with these
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
young people. My own daughter edited it few times, and they, she's Canadian born, and then her friend, they edited and they had questions, and they have come back to me and said that, you know what, we have learned about 1984. Nobody ever told us in a way you told us in the book. We always hear, okay, this happened and end of story, but we never knew that there are things in the background which you
Yeah.
don't see and psychologically happening. And they were thankful that they got to edit the book, but same time learned something, right? Then I did had a third person who's a professor, PhD. So I got them to look at it, and I got their perspective, who are,
Yeah.
almost my age or younger than me, and they gave their perspective from academic point of view, right? And then I had another individual who gave me perspective from their experiences there in media. And they looked at the book from their perspective and had a long phone discussion with me about what the story is and how I have told it and what can be improved. So I took a lot of feedback
Yeah.
from individuals I thought would be relevant or would have that knowledge to share with me. Two young people from university and two individuals of my similar age who have lived in Punjab that time,
Right.
and kind of brought it together that way. But that you can't do with AI tools.
Mm.
AI tools are very structured, very specific to fix your language, to get a little bit of story.
Yeah.
But I think, especially for the Sikh stories and 1984 stories, I think what we
Mm.
really need is first-hand experiences, as
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
We maybe even I can go a step further, and a lot of academics will not agree with me. Maybe
Mhm.
don't need to we don't need to be accurate in language or
Mhm.
grammar or spellings. That can be fixed. These
Yeah.
tools can help you fix this, or
Right.
our young editors can fix that. But I
Yeah.
think the first expression, that story, the first hand needs to be on the sheet, the feeling
Yeah.
needs to be there. That's what
Mhm.
we need to capture, and we can only capture that if people tell their story themselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think generally, like for me, what I've seen over the years is that we have such amazing stories, experiences that we all have, right? And then there's so many like aspects, whether it's like historical, whether it's like to do with the journey of migration and displacement, whether it's living in the diaspora. There are so many unique experiences to ourselves as Sikhs and as Punjabis. But
Yeah,
often, I don't think we as a community write as much as we ought to. That's something that,
yeah.
again, was a big part of starting publishing house, is to give this platform so people could do that. Um, and I think, like, generally, I wanted to like, ask yourself, how important do you think creative writing is for Sikhs? So beyond like, writing a history book or doing a research factually,
Yeah.
creative writing specifically.
It is extremely important, and I want to tell those people who think they have a story but they can't write. I haven't gone for school for 2 3 years. I couldn't because of the violence happening. We were basically homeless in 1987.
Right.
uh, Threats, fear, um, couldn't attend school, would study at home whatever I can, and then write a final examination and move on to next class to next class. And I have no mastery of any language. I
Mhm.
couldn't finish 100% learning any language. Originally,
Right.
my dad was in army, he was major. So we will move every 2 years, different part of India. And I had to learn Punjabi, Hindi, Assami, this, that. And we will be there for a year. The time I
Right.
start learning their alphabet, we will move.
Sure. Yeah.
English was the only one which kind of stayed with me overall wherever I went. And then I
Okay.
came to Canada as an age of 15 and a half, and I did my high school and then my college and university. I did a certificate at University of Toronto, so I did that part here. But I never really had a grasp of any language fully.
Mhm.
And I made a conscious decision that I must write.
Mhm.
And I didn't go to school for a few years. And it was that important to me that I forced myself. I learned, I practiced, I found my editors who can fix things for me. But it was what was important is that I must tell the story irrelevant of which language it is.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
have written in Punjabi. I have this book, Grandfather's Mulberry Tree, actually come from a Punjabi short story published 20 25 years ago in a Punjabi
Nice.
newspaper, and the name was Nanne Wala Tooth.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Right.
so it's a very, when I say short story, it's like a mini short story. It's like this much paragraph and it ends.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I took that idea, which I wrote it in Punjabi, and the reason I wrote that in Punjabi, because I
Mm.
can't write Punjabi properly.
Right.
I wrote in Ajit Jalandhar, I wrote one of the main newspapers in North America in Punjabi.
Mhm.
The reason was I was learning how to write Punjabi,
Right.
and
Okay.
editors knew that, and they
Okay.
would make sure they edit my article before to
Mhm.
publish it. And that was my
Right.
process to putting myself out there, taking a risk, but saying, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
book, this is another reason it took me 10 years,
Yeah.
because I couldn't get it to that point where I was satisfied that it can go out.
Right.
But right
Right.
after reading this book, I'm so confident now that I think I can write any book now.
Yeah.
And I am
Yeah.
working on multiple books at the same time now,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
who have any doubts, who are listening to me, I can do it, then you can do it as well. And this is important. It is so important that I made it a point of my life to do this. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, if there is one book I have to write in my lifetime, this has to be Grandfather's Mulberry Tree.
Mhm.
If I have
Mhm.
written that book in my lifetime, I feel that I have achieved everything that I
Mhm.
needed to do from the
Mhm.
Sikh point of view, Sikh
Yeah.
perspective. There are more stories to tell, but
Of
this was the
course.
one story that I wanted to make sure is done during my lifetime, and I achieved it. And I'm so glad that I'm able to do it. So it is extremely important for
Mhm.
us to express.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're educating the community as well. You're sharing experience which nobody else would have,
Mhm.
and now you're putting it out.
So, and just continuing on from that, what advice would you give to aspiring authors, like beyond, putting in the effort and not feeling, that they can't do it? You've given some really good examples from your own personal experience, but what general advice would you give to Sikh authors in 2025?
Yeah. Somebody told me once, and I think that's what I will share. Long time ago, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years ago, I was sitting with somebody, and I was telling them, you know what, I want to write this book. And I was talking about Grandfather's Mulberry Tree, that I want to write a book, and I'm having hard time. I'm rewriting and rewriting. This is, way back when I was writing that short story.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and they said, Baljit, writing's very easy. I said, oh. He goes, write the truth, write what you know, so you don't even have to think then.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the story that you know. You don't have to make up a story to be an author. You tell this when you write about truth, truth doesn't need too many words,
No, no. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's why my books are very short. My poetry is sometimes 2 lines.
right.
Uh, and write about truth, write about the life that you have lived.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name, the American novelist who won a Nobel Prize. He said that uh, you know the writing is like is your expression, is something that you can write about something that you have lived. And he says that live the life first and then write, because what
Mm-hmm.
that means is that you will have gained experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
that is another reason which put it, this book gave me 10, 11 years to write, because
Yeah.
I wasn't, I thought there need to be more experiences. I need to learn more. I need to experience more. Certain books that I could have written way back, I purposely have delayed that, because I feel that I don't have enough experience. I haven't lived the life enough
Mm-hmm.
to capture the essence, the perfect essence of those experiences, and put it, those stories, and put it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice is write the truth, write what you know, tell
Mm-hmm.
your own story, put yourself in there. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
writing fiction, go with the experience that you
Yeah.
have and create a story around it. And that's exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is the easiest way to write. Not only it's helping you, but now you're sharing your community's experience that you were part, and you're
Yeah.
telling the story around it. And
Yeah.
that could
Yeah.
be anything, any experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it seems so such a simple approach, but actually it's quite profound because, like you said, you are people often talk about like writer's block, or like, when they're trying to build an entire new world or new storylines, that's inevitable. And perhaps it also happened with this as well. But because you're speaking from your own truth and your experiences, you can really go down into those really deep, right? And then
Yeah,
then bring this forth.
yeah, and a lot of people, maybe, yeah, but maybe the young aspiring authors watching this or listening to this, maybe thinking, oh, okay, then I'm too young. What he's saying is I can't write. So you can write, but write at your level. And sometimes some things are better delayed because you want to live that experience and
Mm.
put a high quality, better thing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and sometimes that is the correct thing to do, but that is up to the individual to make that decision. When I was satisfied with the book, that's when I put it out.
Yeah.
I could have put it out 11 years ago,
Yeah.
but I knew I was not happy with it.
Okay. Yeah. I think also the other thing tied to that is that doesn't necessarily mean that you stop writing. It just means that you just don't put it out into the public domain. Because I mean, I've got, like, I'm sure you have as well. I've got reams and reams of stuff that I've written, and I'm kind of perfecting my art, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
I'm trying to
yeah,
work on myself within that
yeah,
as well. So
yeah.
always write is another thing that I would
Always right. I
say.
was gaining experience through writing in Punjabi newspapers. I was going out in media, doing
Yeah.
different volunteer work, getting involved with different organizations,
Yeah.
and that built me up. And
Mhm.
I wrote an editorial for Huffington Post, different organizations and my nonprofit work,
Mhm.
hospitals and universities saying, hey, can you share your experience with our students? So
Yeah.
can you bring
Yeah.
that into our classroom? I worked on motorcycle helmet exemption for turban wearing Sikhs in Ontario for 4 years. So we
Right.
took us years with a huge team working on it. I was just one part of it. That gave
Yeah.
me a perspective. Sikh people were not able to wear their kirpan and go into the courthouses. I
Mhm.
put myself forward, worked on that.
Mm.
You go out in the community, you put yourself out,
Yeah.
and try to do the best you can. What that does is gives you a new perspective. It gives you a lot of these experiences,
Yeah.
but most importantly, it puts you in connection with all these different individuals,
Right.
their experiences you're tapping into now,
Yeah.
which eventually become the characters in your novel.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is how you bring in the community experience and put it in the words,
Yeah.
and your book is ready.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know I'm sounding very simple and easy. It's not that easy, but one has to start somewhere and be persistent and
Yeah.
keep going at it. The one who will win is who is persistent and again and again and again keep going at it. It will happen.
Yeah. That's so true about like going into the community and living those experiences. Like when I wrote my novel on Baba Deep Singh, the
Yeah.
introduction, that kind of the prelude, if you like, is obviously it's set now, and it follows a young Nihal Singh who's based on my own son, and he's quite inquisitive and sees his picture in the Guru Card, and he goes to this BBG in the Langar Hall. And
Yeah.
all of us can maybe resonate with that experience of always seeing somebody who fits that description in the Langar Hall. So
Langar Hall.
you only connect those dots if you're putting yourself in that environment. So I like how you've kind of framed that.
Yeah.
It's such good advice, because
Yeah.
there's always an opportunity to take things in, and that will
Things that-
inform
and
your story in
And,
some way.
and that's how I believe authors or writers or a creative mind works. Even
Yeah,
I do paintings and I do, just as a hobby. I'm not
yeah,
a professional artist, but those things bring perspective to your
yeah,
life, bring a
yeah.
calmness. It gives you time to think, rethink,
Mhm.
re-strategize.
Mm.
And as we talked about healing, I do these things because they are healing.
So
They put my mind at ease, and
yeah,
I can think more clearly, and I get the confidence that, oh, you know what, I can do it, and I
Mhm.
will do it. And
Yeah,
that's the attitude you need to do, and that's kind of you're doing self inspiration.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
inspiring yourself to do things instead of looking for inspiration outside. So
yeah.
if you can find an inspiration outside, create one. You have mind and soul, create that inspiration.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
art and creative writing and this is great to do that. For me, it works.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very rewarding as well. That
Yeah.
sense of satisfaction of, on the one hand, perhaps using it as a means of, self-development and healing, but also having achieved something. You've put something out into the world for people to engage with, right? So that's amazing. Yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I only wish we had this sooner. I know it's been a few months since the book came out, so thank you very much. Firstly for writing the book, and then secondly, sharing these additional thoughts that obviously will go out now to those perhaps who have already read the book. Maybe it'll give them a different kind of perspective on it. Maybe they'll read it again. But also for those who haven't read the book, who haven't come across it just yet, Grandfather's Mulberry Tree is available to order from khalishouse.com, as well as global Amazon markets across the globe. And I should add that this is a bit of an exclusive, and this is news for you as well, but we are in talks with a global distributor to take take all of our books, including this one, into more local shops. Because as our work has grown, as our reach has grown, holistically and naturally, it's allowing us to have those conversations. So it'll be more readily available to not just the Sikh and Punjabi community, but also the non-Sikh and Punjabis as well. So that's the news on that. And like I said, thank you once again, for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
That's a wonderful news too. So the books can go to more audience, and of course the publishing house is expanding. So good luck with that. And thank you for having me here too, and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on the book. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ji. Okay, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.